Hey friends, my name's Georgie and you are listening to the Just Breathe podcast, where I'll be talking all things breathing to help empower you guys to use the power of your breath to harness your bodies and minds. In today's powerful episode, I'll be chatting to the beautiful Phoebe Hart, creator of Transform Yoga for Dancers. Phoebe helps dancers to maintain a healthy mind and body whilst navigating the pressures of the industry using yoga and mindfulness practices. Phoebe and I have both had careers in the world of performing and have both ventured away from the industry in recent months. We got chatting all about our breakup with the industry, as well as how so many of us tend to label ourselves and really identify with our occupations. We also got talking about the connection between the body and emotional intelligence, as well as how movement can be a vehicle for self-inquiry to coming home to your authentic self. It was truly a really powerful and insightful conversation, and I walked away feeling incredibly empowered, connected, and inspired. Phoebe is such a light to this world and is helping so many dancers to come home to their authentic selves. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Whether you are a dancer or not, you can absolutely benefit from the incredible insights Phoebe has to share. A little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Just Breathe podcast. Let's keep on building that strong breathing community. Let's keep connecting people. Let's keep empowering people through the power of the breath. All right, let's jump into the episode. I really hope you enjoy it. This is episode 37 of Just Breathe with Phoebe Hart. Phoebe is in the house. How you doing, Phoebe?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Really good. Calling in from New Zealand, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cold over here in comparison to where you are now, I think. But
Yeah, well, we finally got some sunshine. It was raining for the longest
honestly,
time. Yeah. It was crazy. But I was joking around with someone the other day about British people, and I'm sure you've experienced this. Well, when it's raining, they're like, "Can you believe how much rain there is?" Then it gets sunny, and they're like, "So hot, isn't it? Awful."
so true, so true.
But like, what's winter or autumn, winter in New Zealand? Is it actually cold?
I mean, I'm actually quite lucky where I am. I'm in the north, and it's named as the winterless north where I am. Because, I mean, it doesn't get too cold, but I
Yeah.
did do a journey to the South Island last week, and it was like -6, so it
Oh
was pretty
man.
chilly.
Okay. All right. But you're doing all right other than that, other than them flipping the seasons. Good.
Yeah, yeah, I'm doing good, thank you.
Good. Well, of course, I know you. I'm very proud to now call you a friend. We've known each other for a long time. Hey, we've sort of only properly connected fairly recently with the crossover of our journeys. And so for the people listening, if it's all right with you, I'd love to jump into your journey a little bit in terms of how it came about that you became a yoga teacher, you starting to help other dancers with their relationship to their own bodies, and just all of that journey into movement with wellness, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey, that's for sure.
Aha.
And yeah, it's so lovely that we've crossed
I
paths on this
know.
journey together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess similarly to you, my journey started out within the performing arts.
Mm.
I trained as a dancer in London, and I think movement's just been part of me my whole life, really. I was a
Yeah.
very sporty kid, and my mum always encouraged me to move because it's just something that I needed to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I channeled that into dance eventually. I picked dance at the age of 18 and studied contemporary dance at a school named Laban. And now, in where I'm at now, when I look back, I actually feel as though I need to credit that school a lot for the journey that I've taken. At the time, I was there purely to be a dancer, but we had the most amazing course, really. The first 6 weeks that I was there, we had to do something called experiential anatomy, which goes straight into somatic practice and stripping yourself back and learning how to move again, which is one of Laban's techniques.
Wow. So just experimenting, I'm guessing experimenting with your own anatomy as if for the first time.
Yeah, as if, so literally before they allowed us to do any of the actual technical dancing, it was the method was, when I was there, I think it's shifted slightly now. The method is that you strip it all back and you explore your movement as a human being and the form of the human body.
I love that.
Yeah, and within all of those years there, as well as obviously studying ballet and modern techniques such as Graham and Cunningham and release, we did have a really rich course filled with notation and learning dynamics of the body and improvisation and so much creativity and play, as well as form technique. And I really think that, I mean, that shaped me as a dancer, as everyone's training does. And I think planted some really big wellness seeds within my being, even if I didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I mean, beyond that training as a dancer, I went off, I graduated and went straight into one of my dream jobs in a big contemporary company and was riding the high life. But within that contract, I had my first ever injury. So I broke my foot whilst we were on tour.
Okay.
And that was the shifting moment for me from the get-go, because I mean, it was more about the emotional journey than the actual physical journey. I had the most amazing team around me of physios, osteos, everyone helping me get back physically, but it was the emotional journey that I went on during that time that made me go, okay, what are the emotional connections in this body of mine between
oh my goodness,
physical and the emotional body.
Wow.
So, that was my pivot point, really.
That's huge. I mean, before we started recording, of course, we were talking a lot about being restricted and how chaos can facilitate so much growth. And that's so interesting that you breaking your foot and being restricted was actually the pivotal point that shifted your path to where you are now.
And I think we also mentioned, like, there's a big shift as dancers and performers right now, because we've all had a restriction put on us. And that was my first restriction of, okay, if you can't be this dancer that you've trained to be and left to be, and you can't do that right now, someone's come in, they've replaced you straight away, like, who are you? What are you doing?
Who am I?
You know? So having that restriction of not being able to do what I thought I was, what I identified as, there was a huge unraveling in that. And it made me really curious as to something beyond the identity of dancer.
Absolutely. I actually want to touch on something you talked about before in terms of when you were going through your training at Laban, because I think it's so interesting how our mindset and our perspective puts a spin on the present moment. And and I can definitely relate to my experience going through training as well. I went through musical theatre and then did a master's in acting, and both experiences, I was so driven by the idea that I was going to be this actress, and a good one, the best one I could be. But if I'm really honest, the best one out of a lot of other people as well, because that was the only way to survive. I was in survival mode, like business badass bitch survival mode to a degree, when I look back. And not to say that I was malicious towards anyone else that I know of. I was like a sort of, the blinkers were on. I was so focused with what I wanted and that I was gonna be successful. That really affects, of course, your experience. If I'd gone back now, I think my experience actually would have been, it was very rich, but it would have been more authentic, richer, because I'm not afraid to play and be curious now. Like, do you find the same thing? That gratitude for the past, you can't change it, but that, like, wow, that label was so, it may as well have been stuck to my forehead on a post-it note the entire time I was there. Dancer, you know?
Yeah, you know what? I feel like there's two parts of that for me, because 100% I will speak about it with some of the girls I'm still friends with from training, and there's only you, because I was very laser focused too, and I wasn't there.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
There's two sides of that for me, really, because I would love to step back into that training right now as me.
Oh yeah.
Because I would froth on all of the classes that I didn't enjoy. And then the other side to that is that actually I feel as though I had a pretty amazing connection to my intuition. And in regards to having a really kind of abundant success mindset back then.
Yeah.
I truly didn't believe that I would not achieve these things, right? I had the most utmost belief in my intention and my goal. Whereas now I feel as though I have a lot more, a harder time listening to my intuition than when I did back then. And I often look back to the Phoebe that was in dance training and the Phoebe that was, had that really, this is for me, and this is within me feeling back then. I tune into her often now to know that she's still there in me, because somewhere along the way, I think once you're out and in the industry and you experience some of the toughness of the industry, you lose that belief in self that I had so strongly at the beginning. So there's two sides of it for me. I'd love to go back and do it as me now, but then I also really appreciated the mindset I had back then, because it did serve me well in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And I wonder, I so relate to everything you're saying. I wonder, what's coming up for me right now is that masculine and feminine. It's definitely, I'm talking about not man and woman, but the masculine and feminine energies that are within us all. And when I revisit that girl who was laser focused success, the same mindset, believed in myself 100%, I would do anything in my power to get what I wanted, and I knew I was going to get it because it was who I was a performer. It was who I was. That was what I was out there to do. When I revisit that girl, I talk about putting the trousers back on. And it's so interesting where you say you have a hard time listening to your intuition. It feels almost more so now. I pose the question, is it because you've removed the label?
100%. Yeah. And when you do strip that label of dancer away from you and you're simply human, there's a lot of unraveling and unlearning and unbecoming that happens in that process. And you know what? Touching on that masculine, feminine energy, so much more in connection with my feminine than ever before, which is really interesting, because I considered myself as a very in tune, creative, free-flowing spirit, but actually I was very rigid and regimented in my approach to a lot of things.
And when I look back at even videos of myself performing in a way, compared to how I move now, how I sing now, just how I express myself, it was rigid because of the mindset I was in, and I didn't realize how not in touch with my feminine I was. It's been the biggest part of my journey as well, stepping into my feminine, stepping into my vulnerability. But how funny, because actually, now I've left performing, I'm probably the most vulnerable I've ever been, which is the key to being an amazing performer, right? Is taking that armor off and sort of connecting with that part of yourself. I have no regrets in any way, because it's that delicacy of the art, the creative, right? But also those bounds and that restriction that the modern world brings of expectation, the word success in itself. And that, you know, of course, we always say we have so much in common right now, because we're both sort of just exploring the void as the void. Mm-hmm. We are sort of like, well, I have removed all labels, and if I am just me and I don't know what I am without a need to know, there's a huge vulnerability in that. It's massive. Like, that's some scary shit, you know?
Yeah, and you know what? This is why I feel like I've been drawn to everything that I've been doing for dancers now, is that, like you said, it's the vulnerability. It is so important to be successful performer, or the best kind of performer you can be, but we aren't really taught the emotional and mental journey as when we train our bodies, right? And we train our craft, but we don't train ourselves to understand and use and work with our emotions. And
there's no authenticity class.
No, there's no, and honestly, it's mad. Now I've done all of the study that I've done with the emotional energetics within the body, and just yogic philosophy and practice itself. It's how different could the industry be if there was this level of understanding from the get-go of how to support ourselves and one another emotionally within a really physical industry.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is happening on a bigger scope within the world right now with COVID, with all this. I wonder if you agree. Do you feel like it's a homecoming, that all of this is, when I talk about my journey with other people, I don't describe it as a transformation. I describe it as a homecoming to the most authentic self that I could never quite access, because I was wearing this suit of armor that was so thick. You know, I may as well have had "fuck off" written on my forehead without realizing it, because I was just so like, nothing is going to stop me. I am going to survive in this world. Whereas now I'm like, I'm already surviving, and I actually trust, like, I suppose, the world to hold me, because I've actually come home. Whereas before I didn't belong anywhere, so I was just scrambling, you know.
This is definitely the society we're in. We're in constant fight or flight with the way that fight, flight, freeze, with the way that our world expects so much of us now. I like to call this last year the Great Pause, because it was, you know, that button that everyone needed to stop and go, whoa, okay, look at all of this madness, you know, that daily life looks like normally.
Definitely.
It's interesting,
really,
because as we trickle out of it, it's tough to hold on, you know, to the lessons sometimes.
There are times when I feel like it's stripped everybody naked, put them in a field in the rain, and just sort of gone, stand there for a bit and just have a stay in that, like, sit with the uncomfortable for a while and see what comes up. Do you know, I really want to jump in. You mentioned the body emotional connection, which of course is huge, and something that even came up at first when you broke your foot, and that you've been researching on a lot. I'd love to dive into that. Not just for performers, but for people in general. We all give ourselves these labels, right? The mother, the lawyer, the banker, the shop work, whoever you are, you know, all these different labels we give ourselves to create the I. In terms of movement and your body, how does that differ, do you think, from stepping away from those labels and actually
wiping the slate clean and going on almost an internal investigation with yourself. Where do you start with then? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, this was, I mean, the pivotal part for me obviously was breaking my foot, but it spiraled me off on a much bigger journey than obviously just the journey I went on as the label of dancer and performer. I actually left the industry. That was the first time I left the industry. After that, I went traveling, and that was my first moment to go, oh, I'm a human. I'm traveling, and I'm introducing myself to everyone I meet whilst I'm traveling as dancer, but actually right now I'm not dancer. I'm just me. And there was so much play in that in regards to movement for me too. I was searching for new ways of moving that filled my soul as much as dance once did, but dance had become this thing that wasn't filling me up anymore, you know. And I found at that moment, I found other ways. I found other sports again that I threw myself into that I loved, returned to the industry. And then when I left again, that was the moment that I went on this seek for practices that allowed me to go inward, like you just said, practices that reconnected me with something that I knew was there, and something that I'd been brought up being aware of as well, with a naturopathic mother and very spiritual mother. Something more than this around me. So my study really began when I went to Bali and obviously did a yoga teacher training like lots of people do, and you really immerse yourself in a whole month of the training. But I have to say massive props to the course that I chose, because I chose a course where it was half Eastern teachers, so 2 teachers from India and then 2 teachers from Western countries. So I believe one was from LA at the time, and
cool.
The company was called East West, and the amazing thing that it gave us was the purest form of the Eastern philosophy and teaching, and then how that can look within our Western world. Because the great thing is that they acknowledged, like, look, it's amazing to go immerse yourself in all of this Eastern teaching and this Eastern culture, but the reality is you're then going to step into a Western world and you can't fully hold on to that Eastern way of being in such a Western society. Like, you could, but you'll have a really hard time, you know.
There has to be an adaptation, and it's almost like being the teacher is almost the translator of an ancient philosophy.
It was such an eye-opener in how I can tune into self within the Western space. So how I can guide myself back to self within the stresses of whichever situation I was in, whether that be dance, whether that be just everyday life. And yoga itself, the thing, I went in on a very physical approach as a dancer would, thinking, you know what, I've got the physical down, you know, I'm flexible, I'm this, I'm that, it's going to be a month of training my body. And I arrived and I was like, oh, I'm not training my body at all. I'm learning about me and my emotions and the purest form of who I am. And the movement is there simply just to guide me in unlocking these parts of myself.
Wow.
That are stuck and stagnant.
Hot damn. Yeah. Learning emotional intelligence. I love how you were learning it though to adapt to the modern world. I think that's incredibly important, in that we all, if we've not been on them, we all dream of these sort of retreats, especially if we're a yogi or, you know, tapped into those practices in any way. You know, it's a huge dream of mine to go to India and learn, you know, really just from the source. But when you come back, you know, it's almost that thing, isn't it, of, are you going to escape, Or are you going to learn how to integrate yourself into your world as an authentic version, so you can still walk the same path that you walk every single day, but authentically in a grounded place, unaffected by the millions of every second of simulation that we face today?
Yeah, and man, we really complicate life.
Yeah.
That was, you know, stripping everything back and realizing that like there is so much bliss and joy. And during that time that I went and did my training, I was very much stripped back. Beyond that, I ended up living in a little bamboo shack in Java in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And you realize just how complicated we've made things, you know?
Yeah. What was the biggest moment for you during that process in Bali? What was the sort of biggest aha moment there?
So I think it was probably, so in week one, my amazing teacher, he took us on a physical journey, which was an emotional journey, and he was building it each day as we went, inviting us to open up certain areas of our chakra system from the base up, so that we could do this clearing from the base up as we went throughout the training. And week one, obviously, we start at the base and the root, and we did a lot of work around that. And I was just so open and taking in everything that there were a couple of Reiki healers on the course too. And they were said, oh, if anyone wants some Reiki practice whilst you're here, we can do that as well. And I was all guns blazing, like, throw everything at me. I want to heal everything inside of me right now. And I had 2 Reiki practitioners work on me in week one, as well as doing the really intense work that our teacher
had. Goodness.
And my whole body went into a complete like freak out. I had like I can't even explain it, but my temperature was through the roof.
Wow.
I could not stop crying hysterically. Like I genuinely could not get hold of myself. There was just so much coming out of me. Like the floodgates for whatever was stored there had been opened on a massive, massive scale. And I just remember it coming. I was in the yoga shala, and I just felt this heat like rising, but I was like shivering. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sick. Like I must have barley belly or something. But I wasn't sick. Like I wasn't sick, but it was such an eye-opener to what emotions can do to the physical body, right? Like I had this huge physical embodiment of what was going on inside of my body emotionally, and I genuinely had no control over it. Luckily, I was in amazing hands, and the yoga teachers that were around me supported me in regrounding and closing off again after opening up so much and releasing so much. And I spent about a day just lying in a tub looking out at nature, trying to but that was huge for me, because I then was like, this is so, like, you're such a physical representation of your emotion.
Absolutely, yeah. All of your, even how you subconsciously carry yourself. You know, what's coming up for me there is, I want to ask you, how much do you actually think in, especially the Western world, both mentally, physically, how much restriction do we actually put on ourselves as we work through our day-to-day lives, as we sort of walk through life, even on, censoring how we move? So even, it's within our DNA to be accepted into a group. And today, that is so difficult. It's almost the impossible task that, you know, how much do you think we restrict ourselves physically in order to fit the societal norm?
I mean, just look at the world, you know, look at how many people wake up, go sit at a desk all day long,
In a box.
and go, you know, movement has been so lost within Western society. And it's, honestly, to be so stagnant physically all the time, and then on top of that to have the amount of emotional stress and craziness,
not unleash it in a
and not unleash it, not moving, not shaking, not releasing anything physically ever. I mean, it all comes, like you said, it all comes with that restriction and that control, and we're in a society where there is so much restriction and control all around us.
And you know, is it a surprise then that we probably have the worst mental health epidemic that's ever existed? The most autoimmune diseases, cause unknown. We all know the cause is stress and emotional stagnancy. You know, but of course it takes I think one day perhaps that will come through scientific literature and make it into the medical industry, but of course it takes up to 40-50 years for that to make it into specific literature and sort of accredited literature. But that science is slow, logic is fast, and logically it's right there, you know. Look at but I don't know if you agree, you said you sat in that tub and looked at nature. Look at the weather, right? It's sunny, and then it's howling with wind, and then it's, you know, the craziest rainstorm, and it's almost, I almost see that as like the world shouting at us of like unapologetically unleashing how wild. And it's, especially as women, I've been speaking to a lot of different people have come on the podcast that are sort of into very much rewilding, and it's a practice that I think is just beautiful, especially for women, in terms of unleashing. Is like, get angry, you know, don't hurt anyone, don't cause any destruction, do it in a safe space, but move your shape, like you said, move your damn body. I mean, of course you're helping dancers all over the world free their bodies and actually come back to self, and rather than here's a thing, rather than giving away their power, right? What should I do? How should I move my body? What's the counts? What's the choreography? How should I do it? We even go further. What should I eat? But how should I think? How should I breathe?
Should I move?
Is there a book on that? Which school should I go to? And it's like, why don't you just stand in a field, take your shoes off, and just see what happens?
Yeah. Control, restriction, and you're right. This is, I mean, I know for lots of people, there's different gateways into this returning to self. And obviously for yourself, breath has been such a huge part of that journey. And for me, just yogic tools in general, breath meditation, physical asanas that are there to open, support, release, but then also integrating that dance that was a big thing for me, in that I spent actually so many years not moving after I left the dance industry.
Did you demonize dance, do you think?
Yeah, I had fallen out with dance so much because of what had happened for me emotionally within my career, and that I was like, okay, I'm not a dancer anymore. And with that came, I now don't dance at all in any shape or form. And if I tried to, my whole body screamed, I don't want to do this, because there was so much trauma within moving like that for me. last year, coming to honing in on my yogic practice and who I could help as a yogic teacher, and going down this whole route of creating a yoga for dancers practice, I healed myself within all of that, and thankfully supported along the way. But
That's beautiful.
The yogic practice can just, I scream it from the rooftops all the time, but it's a gateway. It's a massive gateway into supporting self, finding self, being with self. And ridding yourself of emotions.
But supporting self by being of service to the wider collective, that's something that certainly has unlocked a lot within me as well. That I, before we started recording, I said to you, anyone that I coach, anyone that I work with, they're my teachers. And I've learnt some of my deepest lessons through coaching, through having to somewhat figure it out for someone else in a way. And of course, you're never figuring it. It's their own journey. You're only holding space. But, you feel as a guide that to provide resources, to provide a safe space, that's such a, and I know you feel that as well, it's such a powerful responsibility to hold a space for others. That in itself is a huge form of growth, I think.
Yeah, and you really have to, you can't hold space until you've held space for yourself, which is the beautiful part of it. It's really honestly amazing. I feel as though everyone that I guide and support and mentor and coach is just a complete mirror to myself a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
Like you said, it's a collective, and that's what these practices do as well. It makes you realize the union between all living things, which is,
girl, everybody moves, everybody breathes, right? And that's, us sitting here, and us have both at this point left the industry. That door may open again one day, who knows, but that through both of our work, I feel like we have begun to remove the us and them that was drilled into us by the industry.
Yeah, and very much.
That's some beautiful work.
Yeah, and it is that environment, right? It's that environment that teaches you competition and comparison is life and
survival.
I think we touched upon it, but it breeds you into a mindset and a mentality that there's never enough, and you're never enough, and there's always more to be doing. And it really takes you away from self a lot.
100%. Oh, juicy stuff. I feel like we've only got to sort of part 0.5, and we could talk for hours and hours and hours on it. But for this episode, what is next for you, and where can people find you?
So big question.
I know, they're big questions. Well, in a nutshell, what's next for you? What's coming up? What are your next stepping stones?
Honestly, I really want to continue down the path that I've been on this past year, which is developing my own yogic practice. So again, kind of stripping even the labels that have been put on yoga now. Staying authentic to the Eastern teaching I've had within the physical practice, but also bringing in more of the training that I've had as a dancer. So combining my somatic practice with my yogic practice, and guiding people through a more playful, curious practice rather than the regimented, this is one pose to the next pose to the next pose. I want to keep developing my yoga dance flow, because I feel as though it's a little signature to all of my past. And then also really continuing to support dancers as much as I can as a mentor, and with my Yoga for Dancers program that I run, to try and make my little impact to an industry I once hated, but now there could be so much joy and love within. So yeah, I am on Instagram at Phoebe Hart Yoga, and my main gig is that I'm going to continue running Transform Yoga for Dancers, which is my 8-week course for dancers and performers to come and to learn a real blanket basis of yogic tools that can support them through the heaviness of the industry.
Authentic yogic tools, though. I say this a lot, in that I think I only know about 2 or 3 authentic yogic practitioners, and the rest, I love it. I don't damn in any way it's fit for purpose, but is body beautiful asanas. They are asanas. They are not yoga. As they are, but they are not yoga in its whole entity. You know, it's like the sprinkles on a cupcake, and it's just like holding the sprinkles in your hand. And with Phoebe, I feel like she gives you a bite of that whole cupcake, and it's a beautiful cupcake.
Definitely try to. Sure.
Yeah. Do you know when your next course is for Yoga for Dancers, or is the dates TBC?
Yeah, I am actually aiming to run it again in September of this year.
Cool.
If people show up.
Of course they will. What are you on about?
The last one was so fantastic in March that I'm just having a little bit of downtime from those 2 months before I give my energy out to find more beautiful dancers to help. But yes, September is the pencil mark right now, and we're in the waitlist phase. So if you guys are listening to this right now, you've got until the end of June to get on the wait list, and you'll get a pretty big discount on the course.
Yeah, 100%. And even if you're not a dancer, I would urge you to get in contact with Phoebe. So, because purely the journey to go on to get in touch with your own bodies and to unlock the dancer within you, I think is a beautiful journey. And yeah, I think, it can help.
And I really
anyone.
I aim to teach a lot more yoga dance flow as well. So a gateway into more movement within a yogic practice for yogis as well.
I love that. Oh, Phoebe, it's been rich and beautiful and gorgeous. I expected nothing less. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
So much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.